13 years ago, my grandmother came to me with a journal that had been returned to her by the widow of the late advocate who had been representing her during her solitary confinement. It was during a very dark time in my family when we were unveiling the tombstone of my niece who had been tragically killed at the World Cup. And she came to me and she said, "Darling, I want to give you something." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "I have this journal that I haven't read. I can't read it. I lived it. I don't have to. And I'm giving it to you because I feel like you'll do the right thing with it." I didn't know what she meant at the time. And so I took this journal and I kept it in my house for a couple of weeks until I realized that it's such an important part of history, and I needed to make sure that it was like safely kept somewhere. So I handed it over to an archive, and a friend of mine who works with history. So her and I decided, why doesn't she just transcribe it first? So she started to transcribe the journal. And over time, we both sat and decided maybe we should have it published. So we had it published, and that was 491 days, my grandmother's time in solitary confinement. And then from there, once I had done that, I thought, okay, I'm done. You know, I've done this for my grandmother. I can move on with my life. And she said, "No, this is just the beginning." And for the longest time, I couldn't understand why my grandmother kept coming to me. "Why is it me that you want to tell your story?" And she goes, "I just feel like you'll be the most responsible and you'll ensure that my story is told." Fast forward to her funeral 4 years ago, I could literally just hear her voice ringing in my ear telling me that, you know, you've got to ensure my legacy lives on. You've got to ensure you keep telling my story. And so for me, I just thought, what's the best way in which I can do that? And I felt like talking to not only family, but I think her friends, her confidants, comrades, people that she's counseled over the years, would be a great way to just ensure her legacy lives on, and a great way for us to just tell her story. But I think just tell a different side of her, give a different insight into the woman that I love and the woman that was just a mother to me, you know. She was more than just a grandmother. She literally raised me. And so for me, this journey is really about, I think, just shining a lens on a different side of a person that I just hold so dearly and I just love and miss so much till this day. And I hope really that I can take this to really the world and people can just get an insight into a different side of who my grandmother was.
I think, unfortunately, I tend to dwell on the past a lot and not look at the happy moments, because I'm just so sick and tired of people pretending as if they love my mother. And I know that those hypocrites did not like my mother. And they said all sorts of things, and my mother was not given the accolades that she should have been.
It's also just like educating and like just telling a different side, and I think just shining a lens on things that people don't know, people don't see. And you know, so she doesn't become this figure that's just there, that's sort of like so untouchable, like they've kind of done with Granddad, you know. I mean, he was human too. The guy also had flaws, he had mistakes as well, but they've just painted him to be. And I always say to people are always like, "Oh, your grandfather this, your grandfather that." I'm like, yeah, my grandmother as well, you know, like always. I'm always like making sure that I bring her in, because I'm just kind of like, well, essentially she's the woman who raised me. She raised us, she was there. We can't divorce the two from each other, obviously. But I just feel like she just doesn't have her place in history.
But she will, because of you. And if there was enough fish or paint beans. You know, and I remember my older brother used to really look after Zinzana, but then he died in a car accident. Nobody came.
Sticking with our pillars and, like, you know, our traditions and our culture, what's the one thing that you want to ensure that us as your children, you know, remember, take, like, you know, as a life lesson that I mean, I know what life lessons I got from Big Mommy, for sure. There's so many, you know, like everything we've talked about, like her tradition, her culture, her love of family. I think her sense of love for her community, and I think her relentless pursuit of just, you know, the emancipation of her people. You know, she lived and died in Soweto. I mean, you know how Mommy would never leave Soweto. Like,
even once I asked her, I was like, please may you come and live in Sandton, because we all live in Sandton and we won't have to travel this far. Every single Sunday, I have to come and visit you. It would just be so much easier. She was like, darling, no.